Hey guys, and this is Desi. I'm here to play 6 Days of Snow. I found this on Steam before it was released, and it just got released today. Well, considering I'm in Japan right now, I thought this visual novel would be kinda nice. Well, let's get started. The first day. It was a dark night, and the snow was falling thick and heavy beyond the windows of the car. Everything was pure white, like a saucer of milk had been unpinned over the earth. It looked pretty. At least, it did when observing within the confines of a taxi. But I felt a strange surge of sympathy for whoever might be outside on such a night. The snow can be unforgiving, especially on a mountain like this. Why else would there be so many stories about strange, pale-skinned women that lure unsuspecting men into their icy graves? Very specific. Foreshadowing? In a remote place like this, how long would it take before anyone uncovered your corpse? A day? 2 days? A whole week? Perhaps a month? Being a writer, I couldn't help but ponder such morbid things. Though, I admit, crime fiction has never been my forte. It's always been my belief that there's enough unpleasantries in real life. We hardly need to fabricate anymore. Shachiko says that's because I'm sentimental. Apparently, it's one of my better qualities. Shachiko says sentiment manifests itself in my eyes. I have unusually pale eyes. My wife has quite a way with words. I sometimes think her talents are wasted as a wife and a mother, when she might have an untapped acumen for storytelling. She's certainly good at gossiping with the other women who attend art class with her every Wednesday. Shachiko, however, always blushes and shakes her head whenever I suggest this, even as a gentle joke. She says she's more happy looking after me and our 2 sons. Searching for any greater purpose in life would be presumptuous. I appreciate it, I suppose, but I wouldn't mind if she had a touch more ambition beyond preparing the perfect bowl of miso soup in the mornings. Not that Sachiko's miso soup is anything to be sneezed at. That's one of the things I was going to miss the most, I thought, as the car drove on through the night. Shachiko's miso soup. Miso soup's nummy. The miso soup at Azami-en would be perfectly fine, I was sure, but it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be Shachiko's. This might sound awfully posiatic, but when people have been prepared by the hands of the woman who loves you, and loved you for 25 years, it requires special properties you can't find anywhere else. Maybe there was the best definition of marital bliss. Being able to enjoy breakfast together every morning was a small shared smile, despite not having that much to talk about. It was comfortable, humdrum kind of existence, I suppose. But the further I ascended into the mountains, the more it began to slip away. With each and every mile I covered, the further away my banal life with Chico seemed. Okay, I could tell this was written by an American. Soon the small details, the taste of her miso soup, the pseudo religious watering of the much beloved Buongiamvelias, and the pervading smell of soap, began to slip away. I thought you would miss the soup. I must confess, I was not awfully sorry about saying farewell to any of it. It wasn't that I didn't care for Sachiko, because I did. I still do. We had fallen into a rut, and that was all. We had grown too accustomed to one another, and perhaps I was taking Sachiko and our miso soup for granted. Can't take miso soup for granted, it's always great. It's hard to appreciate somebody when you see them every single day, and you recite the same pleasantries to them, and they repeat the same pleasantries back. It's too predictable. It'd be like playing shogi with being able to read your opponent's moves 5 turns in advance. Where's the fun in that? Sounds like you've been to the supermarket. put it another way, our daily routine had become far too familiar, to the extent that it was almost painful. Shopping's painful. I wasn't trying to run away from Shachiko, I told myself. That wasn't it. I needed a change of pace. I wanted to remind myself how much my wife means to me. I wanted to remind myself why I love her. I was journeying away from my wife so I could learn to miss her again, which would hopefully make our eventual reunion all the more sweeter. After giving it some thought, I decided upon the perfect location wherein I could reanimate on my own marriage. Pretty sure I said the wrong word there. Whoops. Alright. That would be the snow-capped mountains in Hakuba, more than half an hour away from human civilization. There would be no people at the Azamian to disturb my solitude, just the snow and the stars. That was fine by me. Sounds beautiful. The young boy driving the taxicab hummed under his breath a song I didn't know and tapped the fingers against the wheel. We're almost there, he said as he turned to me and smiled. The darkness obscured most of his face, but I could see the reassuring gap-toothed grin. One of his front teeth was missing. I thought it'd be rude to ask why, but I didn't comment. But I couldn't stop myself from fabricating stories. Maybe it was just a rock in the face. How far is it now? I asked him, hugging my trunk a little closer to my chest. Shachiko had helped me pack it before my departure. I told her she didn't have to be bothered, but she was insistent. Despite being such a quiet, retiring woman, Shachiko can be awfully insistent about the most mundane of things. Not too far now, said the boy. The boy might be a touch demeaning, as he must have been in his early 20s. 3 or 4 minutes. Maybe 5, accounting on the traffic. That was probably supposed to be a joke. That was a good one. We hadn't passed a single car during the journey from the train station. I must admit, I was a bit relieved. The road was so poorly lit, any oncoming cars would have spelled disaster. It's not like you need to get anywhere in a hurry, is it? Asked the boy. What are you doing up near Hakuba, if you don't mind me asking? Oh, I don't mind at all, I said politely. I'm a writer. I thought going somewhere remote would help me focus. Generate a few new ideas, that kind of thing. Oh, an author? He whistled. He sounded genuinely impressed. Written anything I know? I doubt it. I'm not well known by any means, but I make enough to pay the bills. What more can a man ask for? I'm not too world-wise, but that sounds like a success story to me. Not many people who want to be authors make so much as a penny. Ha! I suppose so. Whoops. I said, running my hand through my hair. Sometimes I forget I have a lot to be thankful for. What kind of things do you write? Newspaper articles? Journalism? Some poetry, and I released a novel a couple of years ago, too. A novel, is it? He said, as he whistled again. Now, that is fancy. I could be ferrying around the next Ori Mori. Oh, I doubt I would ever reach such levels of fame. I travel, really. Well, I hope you include me in your next literary effort, Mr. Tanabe. Tanabe? E.G. Alright, Mr. Tanabe, I'll remember that. And he nodded his head determinedly, like a chicken pecking up words. That was a crude smile, though, and I trashed myself for thinking such a thing. I hadn't realized it, spending so much of my life inside the city. But I could be quite a snob. Can't we all? That was another reason, I told myself, why I was going to the countryside. Why the countryside would be good. I was always useful to see new sights and broaden my horizons. I opened my mind. The moon up ahead, shining the apex of the sky like a pearl, splitting the swirling fog and snow with pale rays of light. In the dark, the moon looked lethal. Urethal. It was the kind of moon so perfectly round and full that could drive one to madness.
Better include me in your next novel, Mr. Tanabe, said the driver, as the distinct gapped tooth smiled,
and I found myself thinking that maybe I would. He wasn't a character that was easy to forget. The teeth helped.
I'm Hana Yosuke. A pleasure to meet you.
Oh no, the pleasure's all mine, I demurred. And the young taxi driver, Yosuke, tittered.
Incredible. A writer saying that it's a pleasure to make my acquaintance. I never thought I'd live to see that day.
He sounded so bemused by the idea, I smiled. You know, if you really want something interesting to write about,
for the next novel, of course, there's no better setting than the Azami Inn, said Yosuke compassionately, after a lull in the conversation. It's beautiful around there. Not that I have much for an eye for it, still. All the snow in the hills and the quaint little building out of the middle of nowhere. Very pretty.
Yes, it sounds delightful.
Lonely too, I think. But that should suit you down to the ground. A bit of peace and quiet helps stimulate the imagination, right?
That's the general idea. All the noise in the big city can be a bit... I searched for the correct word, but I couldn't find it.
So English.
Maybe I've been stolen by the snow.
Or the word monster. Oh, I can imagine, says Yosuke, sensing my discomfort. I've lived around here all my life, but still, the big city, eh?
A big city indeed.
I love to go there once or twice, just to look around, but I don't think I could ever settle somewhere like that. From what I heard, there are too many buildings and far too many people. I like the peace and quiet, even though I get a bit antsy if I had to stay in the Azumi Inn for too long. I don't know how Miss Kakiuchi does it.
The proprietress?
The one and the same, says Yosuke with a nod. She's been living up there for, gosh, I don't know how long. Maybe longer than I've been alive. Because as long as there's to be an Azumi Inn, there has to be Kaiuchi. She's there to run it with her husband, so maybe she wasn't too lonely before. But he's dead now. Died years ago. I looked at Yosuke intrigued.
Ideas began to grow inside my mind, just like acorns sprout into proud oak trees. What happened to Mr. Kakiuchi? I asked, as casually as I could muster, but my efforts were probably in vain. I already told Yosuke I'm a writer, and people never trust writers. At least, they shouldn't. We crowd around misery like vultures, and pick the bones clean until there's nothing left. Yosuke, who didn't seem to be the most intelligent of all people, was still sharp enough, because he grinned. It was a wolfish grin, all too fitting with the large pearly moon.
Ah, so you're interested, are you, Mr. Tanabe?
He asked.
It's an interesting story. I can't help myself. And rather well known, too. There are all kinds of stories about the Anazami Inn, as I said, and Miss Kakiuchi. Not all of them are pleasant, and I don't believe half of them, but they're very interesting. I shall let you know before you continue. Oh, I shall let you know before I continue. I don't write crime stories. Ha, well, more's the pity, says Yosuke with a shrug. When you get a pretty young woman and a dead husband, there are bound to be rumors. But the truth is a lot simpler. He was old, Mr. Kyoichi, a good 2 decades older than his wife. And you know when you're old and you live up in the mountains, chances are you'll catch a cold at some point and you won't be able to fend off.
So he died just like that?
Just like that. Rather anticlimactic, all things considered. But people love talking. You can't stop them talking. Even in a place like this. Yosuke smiled. I talk enough about myself. My fiancé, Hatsumi, always berates me. Still, she can't hate it that much, or she wouldn't have agreed to marry me. You have a fiancé? Congratulations. Yosuke thanks me, smiling sheepishly. Honestly, I feel a bit sorry for Miss Kiyoshi. All things considered, she must be awfully lonely up there without a husband, and all the residents of Higashikawa aren't too keen on her either.
She doesn't have anybody else?
She has a daughter, sweet little thing, Reiko. Miss Kayuchi has always been very protective, and no wonder, after that happened to her husband.
Reiko. I nodded my head. I would have to file it away for future reference. Doesn't she have any staff?
Oh, she employs a few girls. My Hatsumi is one of them. But it's a small business. She doesn't have many customers, you see.
I see, I said. I did see. I looked out the window and I could see the hills covered with snow, with yet more snow falling, and I could only too clearly. I couldn't imagine how many people were coming to the Azumi Inn, not even those who were very passionate about skiing. There were places to stay, and they were closer to the main roads, where you didn't have to hire a taxi and wind your way through the mountains for over half an hour to reach your destination. If Shichiko were here, I knew what she would say. None of this was very sensible. Still, as I wasn't a sensible man, but a sensitive one, this kind of location would, as Yosuke said, suit me down to the ground.
Ooh.
I apologize for arriving so late. My train was delayed. It's quite all right. I expected as much given all the snow. The woman I perceive as Miss Kakichi replied. I'm happy to receive any customers, no matter how late they may arrive.
Business been slow?
What do you expect? She said with a touch of wary amusement to her tone. Her voice was soft, but there was a certain bite to it, some harshness I wasn't able to pin down. Perhaps the touch of hardness was only to expect, coming from a woman who had lived at this inn high up in the mountains for so long. Had she been softer, I wondered when her husband was still alive.
Beautiful kimono.
I would never know. Very beautiful. Now, Miss Kayuchi. How can I describe her? Words failed me at this time, and they failed me even now. I suppose if I had a single word to it, she was beautiful. That's what I just said! But that wasn't entirely right. She was the kind of woman who had been beautiful once, beautiful enough to drive men into distraction. But old age had tempted some of her beauty, softening the edges so it's no longer had an acute, piercing effect. That was a good thing, I think. Such beauty can be used as a weapon, like an arrow. But this was an arrow whose tip had been sanded smooth. Her hair was dark and glossy, cut into a neat bob reminiscent of the Kokishi doll. It was an unnatural choice for older women. She must have been in her 40s, but that only served to heighten my interest in her. Her eyes were colored the roasted tea leaves, and they were lined with thick, long lashes. When she blinked, her lashes fluttered and bugle manner that could cast shadows against her face. Her skin was pale, and though there were some wrinkles around her mouth, it was unblemished, save for two small moles no bigger than pinheads underneath her right eye. She wore the most modest kimono of mute colors and stood there regularly, her hands held at front of her. If looked at from afar, I could have been forgiven for thinking she was 10 or 20 years younger than she really was. But time waits for no man. At any rate, Miss Kayuchi didn't seem to be the kind of person who steeped herself in her own nostalgia. Everything about her, from the tone of her voice to the way she stood, suggested she was far too sensible to bother with such nonsense. She wasn't sentimental. Something about her posture almost seemed to defy statement. She wasn't like me. I suppose we were quite a poor match.
In any event, I hope you enjoy your stay at Anazumi Inn,
says Miss Kakiuchi. It was the line she must have delivered many times, and she said it beautifully, like the skilled artisan might pluck an art-rendering melody of a koto. I must confess, I feel rather abashed. I had been imagining, in my city-born and bred hubris, that the folk who resided in the countryside were simpler than I, somehow. I had been wrong.
I am Kiyoshi Kayo,
she said, by means of making my acquaintance, though there was a certain resistance to her tone.
It's nice to meet you.
Likewise, I said, bowing my head. My name is Tanabe. Tanabe Iiji.
Mr. Tanabe,
Miss Kayuchi repeated, with a small nod of her head. When she said my name, commonplace though it was, its properties seemed to change in some curious manner. European alchemists might have striven for years to turn base metals into gold, but Miss Kayuchi had succeeded in a certain kind of thermology of her own.
Well, if I need to introduce myself further, I've been running at the Anazumi Inn for 14 years, ever since the death of my husband. I'm sure Yosuke has told you about that already. He might have mentioned a thing or two, yes. You don't need to spare my feelings. I know what people around here say. They enjoy their gossip. There's not much else to gossip about.
I don't think Mr. Hanada meant anything by it. He was just making conversation.
At my expense of my dignity, I
don't doubt. Dignity. I don't doubt. And Miss Kyuchi icily. Though Yosuke hadn't said anything incriminating, I felt myself feeling guilty, as if I conspired against her. She doesn't look too happy.
Let us move from this subject,
she said, noticing my discomfort.
It is unpleasant, particularly after such a long journey. Now,
Miss Koyochi explained the general running of the inn to me, when meals were prepared, when the hot springs were, and who to speak to if I had a complaint, while I nodded dumbly, stunned to silence.
So,
she said, once she had finished her short business spiel,
I trust this is satisfactory?
That is more than satisfactory, thank you, I said, stuttering. Why was I stuttering? What did I say, stuttering was stutter? Being around Miss Kyuchi, held under the steady gaze of her dark brown eyes, had the most incredible effect upon me. I felt not like a grown man with two sons, but a naughty child being scolded by my father for playing too zealously about the Zokoba tree in our garden. Miss Kyuchi was probably a few years younger than I, but she regarded me archly, like one who had been seen far more than I could ever imagine. I know it might sound rather harsh, but I understood immediately why the residents of the nearby village didn't like her very much. She's not a likable woman, even though she's beautiful.
I shall get Reiko to show you up to your room. She may as well make herself useful.
Miss Kayuchi. With that declaration, the propress turned, her bobbed hair fluttering, and called out in tones that would have made an emperor balk.
Reiko! We have a customer!
There was a stifling of feet, and Reiko hastened to answer her mother's call. I pictured her as skinny, uncomfortably so, with big eyes and lips pulled into a permanent frown, her head bent, her gait stumbling. But the Reiko who answered Miss Kakiuchi summoned was rather different. My imagination had betrayed me yet again. Wow. Hold up, I noticed this beautiful woman. Gorgeous. I just have to say, the art is amazing in this game. Looks like as if I'm like an oil painting. She was rather young, and that much was true. Still a teenager, I suppose. And she was slight, but not all in an awkward manner. Her limbs were pale and slender, and she moved like a little ballerina.
Yes, you called, Mother?
She looked as if Miss Kiyoshi did, or had done, I imagine, before old age, had seen fit to snap away her youthful charms. Reiko even had a beauty mark beneath her eye, though it was located under her left, not her right. Other than that, it was almost perfect facsimile of her mother's, like she was some kind of copy. The homunculus child raised in a glass jar. But these thoughts were rather too fanciful. This is Mr. Tanabe, said Kakiuchi, gesturing towards me.
He has recently arrived from Tokyo. Can you take his bag and show him to his room? It's the one you prepared earlier, on the west side. Oh, of course, says Reiko with a small bow of her head. I shall do it at once.
She bent and picked up my bag, fist brushing the sleeve of her kimono to one side when... No, this will never do. Reiko flinched and reprimanded. She was now halfway between receiving my case and standing straight. The sleeves of her kimono were still rolled back, and I could see her arms. They were as pale as the snow that fell outside, shot through the dilly veins. Though I wanted to, I could not bring myself to look away. When you are picking up luggage, Reiko, you shouldn't let your sleeves bunch up on your elbows. It's unseemly, says Miss Kakiuchi.
I'm sorry.
Don't apologize, says Miss Kakiuchi coolly,
for I have told you this time and time again. Try to remember next time, please. Alright.
Reiko sounded too despondent. Any words of reassurance I may have thought to offer died on my tongue. I had already divined, during the most perfunctory of greetings, that her mother scolded her quite a lot. Ooh. Oh, it looks like a tea house. Reiko led me into my room in silence, my suitcase held in her arms. If the case was heavy for her, I did not know. She didn't slow down, and neither did she seem hampered by her burden. Her footsteps were slow and regular, like clockwork, hemmed in her kimono. Really? Kimono. She could only take short, dainty steps, right in front of her to the left, then the left in the front of the right, and then repeat. I followed along behind her like an attentive schoolboy. The wooden hallway was dimly lit, and I could hear the sound of wind rustling outside. My footsteps made the floor creak ominously. I tried to think of things to say, but nothing sounded quite right. The weather is awful around here, isn't it? Would be too pedestrian. You really do have beautiful eyes. Would be too forthcoming. Is your mother always like that? Would have been too personal. Despite having many things I wanted to say, I could say nothing. I didn't know why, but I wanted to talk to this girl. Maybe it was pity, because of the way she had flinched when her mother had spoken to her. And really, she must have been lonely. If Yosuke suspected Miss Kakiuchi of Melancia. Then what about her daughter? Reiko's hair fluttered behind her, inky black like a veil to the darkness. It looked chocolate brown to me. But, though she was small, Reiko did not tarry in her match. Instead, she continued, as quiet as a mirror, and just as inscrutable. Even back then, I was admired with her. Maybe it was the romance of the situation. How could you blame me? There was something very poetic about Reiko's plight, an uncommon beauty, hidden in her prying eyes, lost amidst the ice and snow. It really sounds like they're walking in a tea house. After 20 seconds or so, though it seemed like longer, Reiko's footsteps stopped. She halted by a nondescript wooden door, much like the others that lined the hallway.
Your room,
she said, by means of explanation, not that it needed explaining. I thanked her for all the same, and took my case out from her outstretched hands. Our fingertips brushed for less than a second. If I had been a younger boy, Kinji's age perhaps, I fear I might have blushed.
It's rather late, but we don't normally serve food at this time,
said Reiko, addressing the floor rather than my face.
But I'm sure the cook would be more than happy to prepare something for you. Mother said you traveled a long way.
It's alright, I replied, though it had been some 5 hours since I last eaten. I don't want to inconvenience you.
But you're a guest,
says Reiko. This time she did lift her head.
Doesn't that give you the right to inconvenience us? Just a little? You're paying for the privilege.
Ah, I blinked. Words once more were conspicuously absent. She was actually smiling. So she did not dislike me, and neither was she afraid. She could have been, to joke with me so casually, for that's what it was. A joke. I couldn't stop myself from laughing. It was a small laugh, really, but then again, Reiko's smile had been rather demure. A hearty chuckle wouldn't have suited the atmosphere, and I've never been one to laugh that much. I'm too self-conscious, but Reiko made me laugh all the same. Well, you might have a point, I said. I suppose I wouldn't mind some green tea. I need a bit of warming up.
I know,
said Reiko, with a nod of her head.
It can be horribly cold around here. I hope my room
has a kotatsu.
Of course, we live in the mountains. It would be a sin not to have a kotatsu. Our guests might catch the death of cold,
she said, throwing her arms in the air for emphasis. Aw, she's adorable. I smiled. Well, I wouldn't want that. I don't intend to stay here that long. Though the mountains were picturesque, I did not fancy extending my trip. The most unfortunate side effect of death is that it tends to render people immobile, tied to one place for the rest of their, well, not lives.
I don't blame you,
says Reiko seriously.
I wouldn't stay here if I had the choice. Which I don't.
A small sigh. Oh, well, I shouldn't. Okay, hold on.
Oh well, I shouldn't say things like that. Mother would be crossed with me. She said it's bad for our business. I think things have stacked against us already, but what do I know?
You seem to be quite knowledgeable in my humble opinion.
Thank you,
she said with a bow of her head. Oh god, that sounded horrible. Her hair fluttered caught in the sudden draught of icy air. Okay, her hair is brown, it's not black. I knew it was because of the wind, but
ceased by sentimentally. I cannot help but imagine it was because she was so very full of life. Reiko was livelier by far than she had been before. The sudden contrast between her demeanor, trampled Lily persona, and the new one I was witnessing, witty, funny, and unabashedly charming, caught me off guard. Could a caterpillar have emerged from its chrysalis in the scant 5 seconds? But no, such transformations do not take place so rapidly, not in the real world. I have a feeling in your literature it does. I wondered, did Reiko's newfound freeness have anything to do, perhaps, with the absence of her mother?
Alright, I'll see about that green tea, and perhaps a simple bowl of rice porridge. I think you should get something in your stomach.
Do I look peaky? Reiko pretended to ponder, one hand beneath her chin.
Perhaps a bit tired.
Long train journeys do that, especially at my age.
I wonder, I've never been on a train before,
Says Reiko.
There was something
Wistful about her tone. Her eyes were misty and far away. She was so transparent, her thoughts flickered across the surface of her mind like ripples in a pool. But then Reiko shook her head and clapped her hands, and the illusion was over.
Right, green tea, rice porridge. Please feel free to make yourself at home and discover the delights of the Azamian. Thank you for your hospitality.
Thank you for your hospitality, I said, bowing my head. I intend to. I didn't mean to sound girly there for a second.
Oh, and it's perfectly fine if you want to use the katatsu, but make sure the fire in the blazer has burnt down before you sleep. We wouldn't want you to start a fire.
No, I said, with shaking my head. We wouldn't want that.
Not at all, Reiko
Repeated. Make me think you do want that. But I couldn't help but wonder. Beside her amber eyes, I swear I saw flicker flames. Yeah, I think she wants it to burn. Anyways. Oh, it's beautiful. That was a big katatsu. Reiko was good at her word. She returned to my room momentarily with green tea and rice porridge on a tray. They were both piping hot. She did not linger, though I would have liked to converse with her further. That would have been improper. A woman should not tarry for so long in a man's private quarters, though Reiko was not a woman, really so much a girl. Reiko's kimono flattened out her figure, making it near impossible to tell whether she had curves or not, but her age was apparent by the tone of her voice and the softness of her skin. Not such details improved the situation. If anything, it made them worse. A woman in a man's room at night is improper enough, but a teenage girl? That is truly a source of a scandal. Scandal in the eyes of the newspapers, but the sensationalist romance, if transmuted by the hand of an author. It all depended on how you frame things. Married. Don't. Are you walking on wooden floors or tatamis? In any case, Reiko departed with the now familiar tap-tap-tap of the wooden sandals against the tatami mats, and I was left alone. The green tea was delicious. The leaves brewed perfectly, and the rice porridge was thick and nourishing. I enjoyed the food a good deal, though not as much as Sachiko's. Sachiko knows exactly how I prefer my tea, and she can steep the leaves in a perfect accordance to my preferences, down to the last millisecond. She sounds like a sure keeper. Stay away from Reiko. Of course, Sachiko's tea would be superior. I've been married to her for far more than 20 years. It is as
most curious phenomenon, however, that men accustomed to perfection will begin to tire of it. Is there anything more selfish than a man cannot be satisfied? Sometimes I have to wonder.
Sorry. I have this eerie feeling that there's gonna be a face that just shows up in the window.
It was still snowing outside. I could see the snow in the air, falling thick and fast beyond my window. The sight of it made me feel warmer than perhaps I was, for the room was cold and seemed to bleed heat from the tatami mats. Fortunately, the kotatsu helped, warm both sides inside and out, and tired from my journey. Okay. I turned in for the night, half an hour later. I think I might have dreamt about Reiko. Alrighty. I will get back to the second day after I'll post it tomorrow. But anyways, thank you guys for joining me on this experience. I have yet to ever play a visual novel all the way through, but this seems very lovely. But like, subscribe, and I will post much more content. I am sorry for the long pause in all of my videos. But anyways, this is Desi, and I'll catch you later. Bye!